Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Thursday morning. Great to see you. Hope you're well and cheerful. And as always, thank you so much for joining us for our Bible reflection for today. Continuing our adventure through the book of Joshua. And today we are in chapter 12. So without further ado, here goes Joshua and chapter 12. Now these are the kings of the land whom the Israelites defeated, whose land they occupied beyond the Jordan towards the east, from the Wadi Arnon to the Mount Hermon, and with all the Arabah eastward. King Sihon and the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the Wadi Arnon, from the middle of the valley as far as the river Jabbok, the boundary of the Ammonites, that is half of Gilead, and the Arabah to the sea of Chinneroth eastward, and in the direction of Beth Jemishlah or something, the sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, southward to the foot of the slopes of Pisgah, and King Og of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and Edrei, who ruled over Mount Hermon and Salekah and all Bashan to the boundaries of the Geshurites and the Matharites, and the other half of Gilead to the boundary of King Sihon of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the Israelites defeated them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave the land for a possession to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. The following are the kings of the land, whom Joshua and the Israelites defeated on the west side of the Jordan, from Gaal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak that rises in Seir. And Joshua gave their land to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to their allotments, in the hill country, in the lowland, in the Arabah, in the slopes, in the wilderness, and in the Negeb, the lands of the Hivites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which is next to Bethel, 1. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Gader, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tappuah, 1. The king of Hepher, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. The king of Medon, 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron Meron, 1. The king of Ashaph, 1. The king of Taanach, 1. The king of Megiddo, 1. The king of Kedesh, 1. The king of Jokneam in Carmel, 1. The king of Dor in Naphath Dor, 1. The king of Goyim in Galilee, 1. The king of Tirzah, 1. 31 kings in all. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, not the most exciting chapter to read, but I shall try and help you with this to explain what's happening. So, they've kind of conquered the land, and what it now is a whole list of places which have been conquered, which God has conquered, and it names them, as you can see here. It names them like a list. It's meant to be read like a list there. See, that's how it is. And just to sort of explain it vaguely, you've got some of the. Firstly, it talks about the lands like Og and so on, Bashan and so on. They're the ones, king of Sihon and so on. They were on the other side before they went into the promised land, which Moses conquered. Moses conquered those. Then they go into the promised land and they conquered the south and they conquered the north. One or two small things to bring to your attention. The Jebusites, they were the people that lived in Jerusalem before that was taken. These list of kings. Kings is a slightly unusual word for us, which don't quite so we tend to think of a king as a great country. Often these were basically rulers of a particular city. So you might be a ruler of a city rather than a ruler of a country. And your whole lot of them listed there. One in particular, the place Megiddo, is quite interesting because there's a hill at Megiddo. Hill Megiddo is where you get the word Armageddon, which gets later mentioned in the book of Revelation, later on in the Bible, and so on. So essentially, what you've got here is a whole list of places which have been conquered, starting with the ones outside the Promised Land and going to the ones inside the land, and mentioning goes all around from the south to the north, all around the Dead Sea, and so on. And there's a whole list there. Now, to which you're thinking, what? Okay, that's fascinating, but what? So, what does this kind of mean for us? I guess that has to be the $60 million question, doesn't it? Well, I think firstly, what you need to do is to kind of just, if you can forget, almost put alongside the kind of moral considerations of conquest for a minute. The way the people at the time would have interpreted it was a list, if you like, of the faithfulness of God. At the beginning of Joshua, God told Joshua, "Do not be afraid. Do not be courageous. Do not be afraid, because the Lord your God is with you, and you will take the land." And what you've got here, if you like, is a whole series of things which God has done, places where God has been powerful, okay, and where God has been true to His word. So you've got, in a sense, I suppose it will be a bit like, say, a parish priest looking back over years and years of ministry about, look at the great thing God did here, look at the great thing God did there, or looking back at your life and saying, I know God was faithful to me there, I know God was faithful to me there. And in a sense, what you got here is a whole list of places which God has given into the hands of His people. So if you like, they will have interpreted it as a list of God's acts, of God's faithfulness. That God said at chapter 1 He was going to be faithful, and He's proven it 31 times, if you like. So I think the way this to be interpreted is a list, trying to think of it less as a list of sort of conquests. Instead, think of it as a list of the numerous times where God has been faithful. Some of these armies they're up against, as we discovered yesterday, were actually quite big and quite ferocious. It was a large army as big as the Sons of the Sea, highly mechanized and highly well equipped with horses and so on. And God defeated them. So instead, just think of this, if you like, as 31 times where God has been true to His word. That's us. Think of it as a list of God's acts of faithfulness, and it does kind of come across rather better that way. The second thing I want to say is, which it does tell us really, is that in a sense it's 31 times where God has been king. These three people thought they were kings, but actually God is king. The Lord is king, He rules supreme. God is king, and all the other kings which they had before in Canaan, so all the other gods which they'd worshipped in Canaan before, now they've proven to be useless, and God is the one true king. So, if you like, God, by these 31 acts of faithfulness, God has shown that God is king. That that it's not just it's not just even Stevens with them and the other gods. Actually, God is king, and if you like, 31 times He's shown it. So, think of these so far as 31 times where God has been true to His word. A bit like looking back on your life and saying, God help me then, God help me then, God help me then. If you like, it's 31 times God's been faithful. Also, think of it as 31 times where God has shown that God is king and that God reigns supreme. So that's that one. It's also, however, worth remembering that the way God did this was He used the faithfulness of His people. God said, do not be afraid, I'm with you, the battle is yours, I'll fight it for you. But the people had to be faithful as well. And if you like, this is 31 times where it's been demonstrated that, by being faithful to God, God has come up trumps. So it's actually 31 times when the people of God were faithful to God as well. 31 times when they got it right. I mean, there are many, many times in the Bible where God's people get it wrong. The list does go on and on and on. And of course, we still often get it wrong today. But actually, when God's people are faithful, when God's people do what God says, when God's people remember that God reigns and they put their trust in Him, 31 times God comes up trumps. So, this list, think of it as 31 times where God has been faithful. When God said He'd do something and God has done it. 31 times God is faithful. 31 times where God has shown that God is king and He reigns supreme and He is the true king. And thirdly, 31 times where by being faithful to God, God's people have shown, that by working with God, great things can happen. And then I'd like to finish this chapter, in a sense, if I may, by reading the last verse of chapter 12, when it says this, and the land had rest from war. So after all these battles and so, which had gone on for several years under the rule of Joshua, actually, when it was all over, there was peace in the land, and the land had peace from war. And I think that's a lovely thing to sort of finish off with as well. Friends, I hope you found that helpful. Have a lovely day. God bless you. Thank you for watching. As I always say, do share these messages with your friends and enjoy your Thursday.